Lead Snorlax is the best lead Zapdos Punisher because Raikou is not nearly as threatening to a healthy team, especially the offensive teams that Zapdos often leads off on, even though it's a better Zapdos wall. So some players like to thunder Snorlax down and force it to rest before going with the standard early game defense of spiking with Cloyster and phasing with your normal resistant phaser. Emphasis on normal resistant because otherwise you can get rolled over by a Sleep Talk Curslax. But Fear's going to skip that because Thunder's accuracy means that you're potentially giving Snorlax free boost and then you're just scrambling to counter it and it's going to damage so much of your team. So he goes right to Cloyster, skips all that, and he goes for Spikes first instead of Toxic because you might be thinking, well, if early game Snorlax is such a threat to these offensive teams, don't you want to get that Toxic on as soon as possible? And the answer is, if he's Lovely Kiss, which is a very real possibility because catching Cloyster is potentially very valuable for much of the mid-paced offensive metagame, like Vaporeon, Exeggutor, Machamp, Tyranitar. Yeah, if that gets Lovely Kissed, then and you've Toxic, then okay, you've temporarily done a little bit to Snorlax, and then you're going to have to phase it out anyway. Whereas with Spikes, you're doing damage to nearly everything for the whole game, including Snorlax. And if he Lovely Kisses, that's what your normal resistant phaser's for. So you're getting the best overall value, especially in the long term. And if he doesn't Lovely Kiss, then you know your Cloyster is still available and active. Even if it took a para, it can still get that Toxic off. Or just boom right away. Although, as we'll see very, very soon, then you're usually not going to want to boom like this unless you have a Machamp to follow it up. So that Snorlax that just took a lot of damage, but not quite enough to be prevented from resting, especially because you can't sleep it poison, then you're probably not going to have anything that chases it out to keep it at that low health. So you're really getting the benefit of having boom with it on Cloyster. So as we're about to see, then the preferable move is to save your boom for a more opportune time, because there is going to be one, and just bite the bullet if he's got the coverage with the phaser. Better in the long term. So that's what we see here. He finally lands the paralysis, and luckily avoided it with Cloyster, so I think that was fair. Cloyster speed is definitely pretty valuable, as just mentioned, and he's going to not eat an Earthquake, so could mean a lot of things. Maybe he was just conserving his Lovely Kiss because he feels he'd get more value out of it later, like against Fear Zone Snorlax. Maybe Self-Destruct, maybe Fire Blast, yada yada. But generally, pretty good to assume that it's not. So, here's something else that's pivotal. Tyranitar against Cloyster is a weird matchup because Tyranitar does have super effective Rock Stab, but Cloyster's really bulky. So it's not really that scary. Now, if it's like a one-on-one and Tyranitar is fully healthy, then yeah, sometimes Tyranitar gets some pretty good value out of hitting it a couple times. But it's generally preferable if you've got a Ghost to follow up, as we're about to see. So he's going to get that Rock Slide, and this is very common of greater trend. I don't want to say trend because that makes it sound like something that comes and goes, but a greater habit of many GSC players. And that is electric types switching into Cloyster on the surf, and then proceeding to spread havoc with Spikes down. It's what causes a lot of problems for a lot of players. Just the straight ahead surfing with Cloyster when they're faced with a target, or that surf would be hit well by. And this is what makes Earthworm such a great player. He's aware of how players handle these situations, and thus he gets the jump and booms immediately. And this is something that is key in GSC with how important boom can be in winning and losing games. An underseen way of using it is using it against a Pokemon that resists Explosion as your target comes in. Because it's not, it's still pretty difficult, don't get me wrong, but it's not nearly the same as when you're aiming for when you're actually staring down your Explosion target. It's a lot more easy to pull the trigger of switch to normal resist, eat the boom. So let's say you're a Gengar facing Skarmory. and you just want to T-bolt the Raikou, then explode on it, because it's a lot riskier for you to just T-bolt the Raikou again, because if he just attacks you, then lights out. But it's a lot harder for him to predict you exploding on the Skarmory and catching his Raikou. And that's pretty much what we saw here. And yeah, that was very key, because Zapdos really holds these teams together. So it could be argued that it may have been smarter to go right to Zapdos and cause havoc with spikes down. And some players will say, well, booming early with, as we saw with Fierce Cloyster, not always a good idea. But that's in situations where you're not going to really make use of the boom. And a more valid argument, I would say, would be, well, how do you know he doesn't have a Gengar? That's super valid. And I would say, yeah, that's fair. Gengar and T-Tar is a very potent offense combo. However, it's unrevealed, and you don't want to potentially switch it into a Surf with Spikes. That's just unnecessary damage. That can be key later in handling all sorts of things. Things are bulky. You don't want to. You want to make use of Gengar being able to take that Surf or Thunder or Pursuit or Rock Slide or something. So I think, and not to mention, it's not exactly a guarantee that he has it. So I think that was a good boom, since it's so uncommon to see it in that scenario, and that was a huge part of the game, especially because the next thing we see is a Machamp, and Machamp is often checked by Zapdos on these offensive teams. So Earthworm's in a real tough spot here. Fear is, sorry, Earthworm's got the advantage. Now, Fear might have some fighting resist, because when you've got, Cloyster, T-Tar, Snorlax, you're going to want some backup, because Zapdos, although it might seem immortal, it's not. And, yeah, it can get put in a bad spot pretty easily, and Machamp uses Curse and Rock Slide, so get some sleep or some para in there, it can get messy kind of quick. Very often, Cloyster has to threaten it with Explosion, as we mentioned Cloyster's offense checking capabilities earlier. So the backup is usually going to be Exeggutor or Gengar. Nidoking also very possible. So we see Earthworm go for an Earthquake here, trying to hit that Gengar or Nidoking, which are very popular with Tyranitar. And Earthworm was not expecting Fear to stay in, say, I got to bite the bullet, because he's got Lovely Kiss, and that neuters the mechanic. Of course, he would have lived a Cross Chop, barring crit, of course, even though it would have taken a real nasty chunk, and he could have rested up after, but he decided it was a risk worth taking. So now he's going to fire off Double Edges, having gotten out of that better than he could have, or better than he was expecting to. Worst cases he just gets crit by Cross Chop. But yeah. So now he's gonna fire him off and crit Zapdos. And Zapdos' switch is kind of curious, but it's not the worst thing, because Snorlax has already taken some damage, and thus he can then force it to rest. Of course, phasing it is nice. There's a lot of teams that can weaken Snorlax and phase it all day, but when it comes to actually killing it, it's pretty much, well, I gotta get my explosions right. And with most teams, then it's Machamp that's really going to threaten the Snorlax after it's been forced to rest. Most teams that it's on. So that's kind of not as ideal for Earthworm as he'd have liked. But he then ends up going to Rhydon. So he's got a backup. And that's his normal resistant phaser, makes for a nasty offensive core with Machamp. Fulfills a lot of defensive duties. So he's going to go to Rhydon rather than Flail and let Zapdos potentially get even more messed up by Snorlax's tricks. No, if Sleep Talk doesn't go his way, like if he gets a bunch of HP Ices. So he sussed it out that it is Double Edge, so it's Lovely Kiss Double Edge, and he's going to assume Curse Rest, because that's generally kind of safe. So he goes right on as Fear goes to Raikou, saying, I would prefer to preserve the Snorlax. This is a we'll come back to this move. Um, actually, the we'll go back to it. We'll come back to this later on, where he switches out the Raikou or the Snorlax from the Zapdos to Raikou. So what's curious here is that Raikou is a lot likelier than Zapdos to run HP Water, which Earthworm does not really want because, the ground resist is also gone. Not saying that Zapdos is really a right-on check. I mean, if it's HP Water, kind of, but it at least dissuades Earthquake. It's a lot easier to pivot into Rock Slide than Earthquake. So, Exeggutor is looking really nice here. That backup fighting and ground resist, yeah, that would be really nice. Um, so, unless he's got something more offensively inclined, like Vaporeon can at least retaliate with some offense to most users of ground attacks, and it's not really a good Machamp counter, but it can help. Anyway, so let's continue. So we've got a switch to Tyranitar here, which is pretty. Either he thought, hey, this guy is going to predict my HP Water and switch to Snorlax, and I think that's probably the likeliest move. But Earthworm, um, and there we see Marowak. Trying to forget that because I'm trying to focus on what just happened. But yeah, so I think he was definitely expecting. Well, it's twofold actually, I would say, because um, HP Ice, Cloyster is pretty low. He's at 43, not really wanting to take that Earthquake. It doesn't kill, but it's also not really something he wants to do because he's pretty much just forced to explode. It's not going to be of any use. Now, while it's very likely that Earthworm's sole explosion resist is Rhydon, so he could pull a similar trick, it still would be his preference that he gets to time the explosion offensively rather than being cornered into it, because cornered explosions are the easier ones to take advantage of. So, but yeah, if he's not HP Ice, then he doesn't really have a choice to of letting Raikou just die, because then he's probably in trouble against Zapdos a little bit, or at least the Zapdos and Rhydon core. At least Raikou can threaten Rhydon if it dips to some health, and Tyranitar's looking kind of useless. Oh, and if he tried to pivot the HP Water, he would have a good matchup against Snorlax, or at least he would be able to Rock Slide, phase it out, make something else happen, and still have the sack. So yeah, that was the better move. And now Marowak comes in. And speaking of Zapdos' ground resist, yeah, here it is. But Rock Slide does a lot for Marowak. So let's continue. Yeah, Earthworm's not staying in here. He needs this Rhydon, and he is going to pivot with the Zapdos. And Fear does not take advantage of that. That's a hard move to make, though, because Rhydon does live in Earthquake. And yeah, he might also think, well, Zapdos is pretty valuable because it can force a rest from Raikou, and then that's more opportunity for Rhydon. But that also doesn't mean risking Rhydon. So that was a little jumbled. I think Fear was just trying to play it safe because Zapdos was at such health where he can probably he's going to beat it one-on-one anyway. It'd be different if it was a healthy Zapdos switching in. He wasn't as pressed to have to be able to hit it on the switch. Because then, he would just get 2 KO'd by HP Ice. But, yeah, since it was at 60% and asleep of its own volition, then he was going to, he figured he's just going to take it out. We're going to look at this a little more since I fell behind. Even the really slow option on the replay is just so fast. For, what I would like to be able to get into a narration anyway. So he misses Rock Slide on the Sleep Talk, which calls rest. In Fear's ideal world, he Sleep Talks Thunder and it just dies. But he was not so lucky. Of course, then he Sleep Talked Thunder, Sleep Talked, I guess, Thunder and Rock Slide, and now we're in this annoying little dance. That is so infuriating because It's even against like we mentioned the Curse Machamp Rockslide scenario earlier. Like if it's not your ideal scenario is it Sleep Talks Thunder and misses. And because even if it just keeps calling rest, then Rock Slide is not at perfect accuracy or infinite PP. And I'm not saying, I mean, that would be ridiculous to get stalled out like that. But yeah, it can be annoying even when asleep. That's part of what makes Zapdos so great. Anyway, he also figured that he would be able to beat the Zapdos one-on-one unless it got really lucky. Because he doesn't need Marowak to be in pristine health. He just needs it to be healthy enough to maybe take a Quake from Rhydon right now. And he's also, I mean, right now he's trying to stay afloat against what he knows Earthworm has, but he's also got to be thinking a little bit of what the last might be. And it could be a lot of things. So it's not really easy to predict. Like, it could be a Vaporeon, it could be an Exeggutor, it could be a Gengar. Those are all very, very possible. So he does get Zapdos out of the way without losing any health on Marowak, so no harm, no foul. And here comes Jinx. Jinx is one of the most devastating Pokemon in GSC because it's so fast. I mean, we mentioned Cloyster was pretty speedy against the metagame, but Jinx is really fast. Pretty much the only things in most GSC games that you're going to see that are going to outspeed it are Zapdos, Gengar, Raikou, Starmie. So offensive stuff is just going to get outrun. Nidoking, because Cloyster is pretty fast, but it's not faster than Nidoking, but Nidoking just left in a trail of dust. Anyway, speaking of dust, that's also what its Ice Beam turns Marowak into. And with these guys, the 65 lakhs and the Raikou with spikes down, I'm not saying Ice Beam is going to disintegrate Raikou now that it's dropped to 94 with spikes up, but it's a pretty dicey proposition, especially because we're going to assume no HP Water because he had to use it against Rhydon. And HP Ice is still threatening, but he's also got the lax as an interim measure. And now things are going to really start dropping Earthquake. I mean, he can still take one with his Marowak. So in return, Marowak is also a giant threat. So basically, Marowak is not staying in here, I believe, because look at that. That's a KO whenever it comes back in. So that's going to be important for this trade-heavy end game. So Jinx is going to fire one off, and Fear is going to go to Raikou. If it's a Rest Hawk Raikou, that helps a lot, but most Raikou are Roar. And he eats the Ice Beam. Look at that. That is so much damage. If Freeze is just going to be too much, so he's pretty much got to contend with that. So here he goes to Cloyster to try to eat the Lovely Kiss. And he does not get it. And that was a great move on Earthworm's end. That was just absolutely excellent. I think that was really, really just let's look at that. So sorry, I didn't expect the video to go this long because I didn't expect to be pausing it like this. So I'm trying to find more music. So let's look at it. Basically, if Raikou stays in there, he's almost surely resting because he's got to stay healthy. And even if he thunders, Snorlax can take two of them from this health. And then he can, I mean, if he's a rest variant, he can rest, or he can just attack because no normal resist left. I mean, Cloyster can take a body slam, but basically he kept the option of Lovely Kiss open, and if Raikou went on the defensive, then he had the offensive option ready. And even if Raikou went on the offensive, then it can still take an Ice Beam from Jinx. So I think if he was going to attack, that was going to be the better move. Of course, it's not as simple as stays in just thunder. So he could have because Rhydon is also a possibility, and at this health, Rhydon's really scary. I mean, Snorlax and Rhydon are both going to let Cloyster in, but basically, then he's still got to contend with the Jinx afterwards. So after he responds to Rhydon with Marowak, so it's going to be a very trade-heavy endgame. If he goes down that road. So now Fear's attempt to absorb the Lovely Kiss, this works out because now Cloyster is in that position against Snorlax, didn't have to risk a body slam para coming in. So now he's got the explosion option. And of course, if that works out, then that's really, really, really good. So nope, he surfs. He's playing it safe. No, and he's got to get the para in order to make it threatening. But I think, I'm not. I'm not sure about that one. I think a lot of players I've noticed tend to keep Snorlax in on the explosion targets because it's really hard to pull that trigger. So I mean, people like to paint Boom as this, trigger happy, blow up every other turn thing. But I think, what I've observed, and a lot of players are, it's not easy to pull that trigger, especially in a game like this. So if he blows up the sleeping Machamp, who gives a shit? So, and the Snorlax is still a threat. So, and now he's not getting much out of it because if you kill a Pokemon while poisoned, then you don't get the poison damage, and he doesn't have anything else to switch in. Of course, that's not really going to matter because Marowak's still going to come in and kill something with Earthquake. The only question, but it does matter because if Earthworm chooses to sacrifice the Machamp and preserve the Snorlax, he's going to get his leftovers here, and that can be key in surviving a Raikou Thunder and resting up down the stretch. Also note that Fear has he can switch into Ice Beam one more time, so that's something to keep in mind. But he is going to kill something here, and he's going to let that be Earthworm or Snorlax. Sorry. So now Jinx is coming back in, no other choice, and he's going to fire off another Ice Beam. Or, so we think, because he absolutely could go for a Lovely Kiss, because if you Lovely Kiss the Raikou on the switch, and then it can't, unless it's Sleep Talk, which it could be. I think double Sleep Talk is very good against warding off as many offensive threats as you can while still being an offensive threat yourself. But Roar is also a great option for dealing with generally like Toxic Umbreon when you don't want to risk the Toxic on your Tyranitar, but you also don't want to potentially give up a Mean Look Trap Pass. Same with, well, not so much Misdreavus because you pursue Misdreavus, but off topic. Sorry. So we're generally Roar is preferred because it's also a great offensive weapon. You make things rest more easily, and that's really good for Marowak. So he could Lovely Kiss here, and he could do the same for Snorlax. And if Snorlax comes in on Lovely Kiss, then the thing that can actually take a few Ice Beams and respond back, then that's really scary. So especially because he has the Sack, and then he's got Rhydon. So I'm not going to go into the exact math of it, even though I kind of really want to, just for the sake of not making this video go an hour. But yeah, basically, if he lands a Lovely Kiss on Lax, then he's probably going to kill it. So then he would go to Raikou to preserve all his tools and his options for the SAT game, and we would go from there with the Rest versus HP Ice, because we gotta assume it's HP Ice on an offensive team. You're generally not going to be seeing Reflect, and so that would be a very tough rabbit hole to go down. Ice Beam is safe because even if Raikou comes in and rests, which it kind of has to, then you can keep attacking and you have your Lovely Kiss still open. So I think the move is Ice Beam. So Raikou comes in. If it's Sleep Talk, then, Lovely Kiss isn't going to make much of a difference, and you would prefer to have that extra hit on it on the switch, that crit or freeze chance, because Jinx thrives on secondary effects. And you can also just Psychic Spam if it does end up being a Sleep Talk variant, but you're also a lot likelier to take advantage of it with Rhydon. I mean, you would prefer that it would be non-Sleep Talk, so Rhydon could get 100% safe switch, but you get the idea. And of course, if he doubles to Marowak, then he doesn't have that Raikou can take one more Ice Beam thing, which is such a big deal. So he's got to make something happen and then account for the fact that Rhydon's probably going to switch in. Now, Jinx it was pretty safe to stay in with Jinx if you really wanted to, because Raikou doesn't immediately threaten it, and he can go to Rhydon after. And even if, first of all, pulling off that double switch to Marowak as Earthworm went to Rhydon after, I hate these fucking ads. Um, that's an incredibly tough move to make in the face of an ice beaming Jinx. And not to mention, he's not even forced to do it. Even if it's sleep talk, then he would pretty much just be forcing Fear into a position where he's got to rest, and then he gets that right on in and causes more pain. Marowak can still take one. That's important. So let's see what happened, and he goes for the rest. So now the earthquake is happening, and Marowak is going to be able to take one more. So he is going to switch into it. He takes it. And now we're going to see the earthquake fired off. And he's going to sack the Machamp, I think. Right on. He wants the health for the Snorlax, because otherwise, Snorlax, now that, well, Sleep Claws is not active yet, but he doesn't want to risk anything against an endgame Curselax since his Machamp hasn't slept, so he's going to take this. And after this, then nothing can switch into Rhydon's Earthquake anymore, so he's fine with letting this go, going back to Jinx, firing off the Ice Beam, and then going back to Rhydon. It's very likely that he's going to be able to pull this out. Since something's not going to die, but the thing is that he has a switch into Snorlax, because Snorlax is Lovely Kiss, and while the kiss is still what's the word? Well, first of all, Earthworm can Lovely Kiss himself, so he's got the upper hand. And even though Snorlax's Lovely Kiss is also active, then it's harder for him to pull off. He would have to do something insane like bait it and then switch to it here, bait it, and then switch to Marowak, and then he's just still struggling with the Rhydon. So Earthworm's got a huge upper hand right now. So Jinx coming in, Ice Beam incoming, and Raikou is going to come in to take it. So if it's Sleep Talk, that gives him a much better chance. Because otherwise, as you can see here, he's just not going to make it. It would take extraordinary luck. Because, with all the Ice Beams and Psychics, and all the hits it's going to be taking, just one thing goes wrong, it's ball game. So, not to mention that he can, even if he is just rest stalling Jinx, at some point Rhydon can come in and fire off another Earthquake that will kill something. So, he's going for the Psychic, just to give himself that drop option, as Raikou does reveal Sleep Talk. Now, what we see here, Raikou does not fear one more hit. It will live one more hit, and then it can rest after, so it can continue this cycle. So it does not need to draw rest here. Of course, he doesn't want to get crit either. In an ideal world, he Thunder crit Paris, but that's not going to happen. So he does rest, although he did not have to stay alive. So Jinx is going to keep firing off Psychics. He's just trying to... I mean, it's hard. When he's talking, it's harder to predict, It's not like Fear's going to go, well, I predict him to switch to Rhydon now, so I make my call HP Ice. So, of course, the odds of him getting a Thunder that actually impedes Jinx, or a Sleep Talk that actually impedes Jinx in some way, i.e. a Thunder hit, and God forbid Para, then that's pretty low. So, he's free to just keep this up for a little while. I mean, at some point, he's probably going to have to bite the bullet and go to Rhydon. He does that here. He was just seeing if he could squeeze out a Spadef drop. I mean, even if he calls HP Ice, then he's got to do it again. And with Lovely Kiss still active and Rhydon still probably going to be healthy enough for the Snorlax, since it's just mono, since it's a Lovely Kiss mono attacker, then it's still likely that it works out for him. We see the Marowak sack here. Raikou has one turn of sleep remaining as he sleep talked the Thunder on the Rhydon. So he's got pretty much no option but to try and pull off a miracle, which is Lovely Kiss with Snorlax, and then try to beat Rhydon with a Mono Lax, a healthy Rhydon with a not healthy Mono Lax, or I don't know, go to Raikou and Sleep Talk HP Ice and then do it again, which is not the most unreasonable thing, in fairness. Hell, he could even try to weaken it into HP Ice range, although that would be really unlikely. Um, so he would just pretty much want a maybe to the point where it was a clean to a KO, weaken him to that level, and yeah, that would be ideal. And then you get a fresh Lovely Kiss off because GSC sleep is so long, and then you would go there and probably not sleep, not sleep talk for fear of calling a rest and giving him more turns, and just hoping for the 3 turns so you can 2 a KO, and then you would probably be able to handle Jinx. But at the same time, it's not a very high percentage strategy, especially because okay, first of all, he's not even guaranteed to hit the Lovely Kiss on the Rhydon. Earthworm can very easily sack to Jinx and then just clean up these last 2 with his Rhydon. And that's exactly what he does with a timer at 30 seconds. So I apologize for the crappy music. It just keeps cutting out because I don't know. I have too many tabs open. So he does sack it to the Jinx, but now Rhydon is pretty much guaranteed to win with the Curse Roar set against a Mono Lax and a Raikou that can't kill it in one hit. So, and it reveals Earthquake, and that just completely changes everything. So that last move is almost surely going to be Rest or Curse. Sorry, Curse. That is a set. Curse, Lovely Kiss, normal move, Earthquake. It's for players who like offensive teams like these and don't usually run Scarm as a result. So that completely changes everything. Earthworm has to flinch and hope for some luck, but he's going to need a couple. Actually, no, I think you just need that. But Roslike can also miss, and Earthquake can also crit, so a lot of odds there. Of course, Earthworm could also crit himself. But then Raikou could still sleep talk the HP Ice and the Jinx. So Fear Surprise Earthquake is going to turn the tides completely. As now Jinx has to, a sleeping Jinx at that, a freshly sleeping Jinx has to somehow beat this double-edged Snorlax. I mean, it's low health, so it would be able to kill it. But then he's also got to get through the sleep talking Raikou. So I mean, not the most unreasonable thing, but it's not even cursed; it's self-destruct. So he really got maximum out of that. So Fear locked that game up, and so that was an incredible game. I really enjoyed that one. So as you can see, this was a really Earthworm seemed to have the edge for almost the whole game, and I mean Fear was on the back foot. He was really just scrapping to stay alive, but the Lovely Kiss Earthquake Snorlax is what saved him. And you may recall that I said we would revisit a certain turn later. Now we can go back to fast. So look at this turn, or the turn after this. So he's double edging and he's getting down. Now I know that he's probably, let's assume he's Cursed Lovely Kiss Rest. Why is he switching out to Raikou here? I mean, even if he's predicting the normal resist phaser, then Raikou doesn't have a good matchup against those. I mean, HP Water does against Rhydon and Golem, and means okay against some T-Tar, but and it's not going to handle Steelix one-on-one. So, I think while you couldn't really say definitively from that turn, if you're really thinking heads up, then you're thinking, hey, that's kind of weird. What prompted him to do that? Because it's not just like a healthy Zapdos against a Lax at this range, and even then you would just rest, right? Maybe even throw in a curse, but it's a sleeping Zapdos at less than a little over half health. So that was it was foreshadowing. Let's call it that. Anyway, I'm sorry this video took so long, but I really wanted to do it justice since I thought it was an amazing game. So Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time. And I will replay it on fast mode so that you can really get the full experience one more time. Let's see if uh, it plays now. All right, so enjoy. Fucking ads. So two more notes. The turns out Marowak did want its health for switching into Rhydon with the spikes down. So the Zapdos thing was pretty key. But then again, Zapdos isn't exactly favored to hit it, considering it's got 2 out of 3 moves that can that don't do anything. So yeah. Although it's hard to see that coming down the line. But maybe Rock Slide was better. Maybe he I don't know. I think it was safer because Rhino was key, but that's easy for me to say. And in the heat of the game, sometimes it's really hard to uh, see with that much foresight, which is partially why this game was so impressive by both players. So I'm just really nitpicking. Oh, and the part where I waved my mouse across the screen all obnoxiously like this, that little sequence where Cloyster did not explode um, on the Snorlax. I was thinking about if Fear wanted to avoid a potentially bad double down situation. Um, I don't know. I've thought about this long enough already. So thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next.